I never expected that a summer thunderstorm would change my life, but that's exactly what happened. For months, my world had been a predictable loop of pixels and quiet observation, all viewed from the third-story window of my apartment. It was a good life, a stable life as a freelance graphic designer, but it was also a solitary one. And from that window, I had a perfect, unobstructed view of the community pool and the man who guarded it. My name is Lucas. At the time, I was 27, and my routine was my fortress. Wake up, make coffee, sit at my desk, and watch the world through glass while I worked. The pool was the center of that world. It was a splash of bright, chlorinated blue in the middle of a sprawling, otherwise unremarkable apartment complex. It was a stage, and every day I watched the small dramas of summer unfold. Kids splashing, teenagers flirting, adults trying to escape the oppressive Virginia humidity. And then there was Caleb. He was the lifeguard. He was probably a few years younger than me, maybe 23 or 24, with the kind of easy, sun-kissed confidence that seemed like a foreign language. His shoulders were broad and dusted with freckles, his hair a sun-bleached brown that flopped over his eyes when he wasn't paying attention. He had a smile that seemed to reach everyone, a casual wave for Mrs. Gable and 2B, a high five for the kids who cannonballed a little too close to the edge. From my vantage point, he was a fixture, a part of the summer landscape like the drone of the cicadas or the scent of freshly cut grass. He was also, in my mind, completely and utterly unattainable. He moved with an athletic grace, a self-assurance that I, in my quiet world of Pantone colors and precise kerning, could only admire from a distance. He was the sun, and I was just a satellite, content to orbit and observe. I learned his routine. He'd arrive around 10 in the morning, unlocking the heavy iron gate with a familiar clank. He'd test the water, arrange the deck chairs with a practiced efficiency, and then settle into his tall white chair, a book or a textbook often in his lap. He looked like every popular guy from every high school movie, handsome, capable, and, I assumed, entirely straight. That assumption was another wall in my fortress, one that kept my daydreams safely hypothetical. It was easier that way, wasn't it? To admire someone from afar, to build them up into an idea, a pleasant backdrop to your own quiet life. It required no risk, no vulnerability. He was just the lifeguard, a pleasant part of my view. I would sometimes catch his eye as he scanned the complex, and I'd quickly look back down at my screen, my heart giving a stupid, pointless little flutter. We never spoke. A shared nod in the parking lot once or twice was the extent of our interaction. It was enough. Or so I told myself. That day started like any other Tuesday in late July. The air was thick and heavy, the kind of wet heat that feels like you're breathing through a sponge. The sky was a hazy, washed-out blue, but dark, bruised-looking clouds were gathering on the horizon. I was working on a branding project for a new coffee shop, trying to find the perfect shade of brown that said earthy but not boring. It was the kind of minute, absorbing task that made the hours disappear. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a sickly shade of green-gray. The wind began to pick up, rattling my window in its frame. The families at the pool started to pack up their things, casting anxious glances at the sky. I watched Caleb move through his end-of-day duties with a calm urgency. He blew his whistle, its sharp sound cutting through the rising wind, signaling the pool was closing early. He herded the last few stragglers out, his voice calm and reassuring. I saw him latch the gate, the metallic click barely audible over the first low rumble of thunder. He started walking away, toward the parking lot on the far side of the complex. And then the sky just opened up. It wasn't rain, it was a deluge. A solid sheet of water that blurred the entire world outside my window into an impressionist painting of greens and grays. I watched him turn and run back toward the small pump house next to the pool entrance, hoping for some meager cover under its narrow overhang. He was completely soaked in seconds. His thin red t-shirt was plastered to his chest, his hair slicked to his forehead. He stood there, huddled against the brick, waiting for a break in the downpour that clearly wasn't coming. Then came the lightning, a brilliant, jagged fork of white that lit up the entire complex for a split second, followed almost immediately by a crack of thunder so loud it vibrated through my floorboards. I physically flinched at my desk. Outside, I saw Caleb jump, startled by the proximity of the strike. In that sudden, jarring movement. Something small and metallic slipped from his hand. I watched, my breath held, as his keys tumbled through the air in what felt like slow motion. They hit the pavement with a faint, unheard splash and skittered directly over the storm drain at the edge of the curb. They disappeared into the grate with a final, damning plink. I saw his shoulders slump. He stared at the drain, then up at the unforgiving sky, and for the first time, the confident lifeguard looked completely and utterly defeated. He was soaked, stranded, and locked out, and I was the only one who saw it happen. My first instinct was to do nothing. It was his problem, right? I was safe and dry in my apartment. Getting involved would be awkward. What would I even say? But as I watched him stand there, rain dripping from his nose and chin, a different feeling took over. It was a simple, uncomplicated pang of empathy. I couldn't just sit here and watch him. Before I could second-guess myself, I stood up, grabbed two of the big, fluffy towels from my linen closet, and headed for the door. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was a deviation from the script, a step outside the fortress. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. The air in the stairwell was cool and smelled of damp concrete and ozone. By the time I pushed open the heavy main door to my building, the rain had lessened slightly, but the wind was still whipping furiously, driving the water sideways. I pulled my hoodie tighter over my head and ran, the cold rain immediately soaking through my jeans. He didn't see me coming at first. He was still staring at the storm drain, as if he could will his keys to float back up. "Caleb," I called out, my voice sounding thin against the wind. He turned, his expression a mixture of confusion and surprise. Water was streaming down his face, and he had to squint to see me. Yeah." I stopped a few feet away from him, suddenly feeling incredibly self-conscious. I saw what happened. From my window, I held out the towels. "I live right over there. In 3A. You should come up and wait out the storm. You're going to freeze." He looked from the towels to my face, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. He hesitated for just a moment in which I imagined a dozen different rejections. But then a small, grateful smile touched his lips. "Seriously? Man, that would be amazing. Thank you." "It's no problem," I said, my voice steadier now. "Come on." I led the way back to my building, intensely aware of him walking behind me. The sound of his soaked sneakers squelching on the pavement was the only thing I could focus on. Once inside, the relative quiet of the lobby felt amplified. Water dripped from both of us, forming a growing puddle on the linoleum floor. "Sorry about the mess," he said, running a hand through his dripping hair. "Don't worry about it. It's just water." We took the stairs up to the third floor, my apartment key feeling slick in my trembling hand. I was bringing the lifeguard from the window into my home. The idea felt surreal, like a character from a movie had just walked off the screen and into my life. The moment we stepped inside my apartment, the difference in atmosphere was immediate. It was warm and dry, smelling faintly of coffee and old books. I handed him one of the towels. "Here. Thanks, man. You're a lifesaver." "For real." He started vigorously drying his hair, his head bent down. When he looked up, his hair was a chaotic, adorable mess, and his smile was genuine. "I'm Caleb, by the way." "I know," I said, and then immediately felt my face flush. "I mean, I've seen you at the pool." "I'm Lucas." "Lucas," he repeated, the name sounding different, more real, when he said it. "Nice to officially meet you." He looked around my apartment, his eyes taking in the neatly stacked books, the minimalist art prints on the wall, the large monitor on my desk. "This is a really nice place." "Thanks. It's home." I took the other towel and started drying my own hair, mostly just to have something to do with my hands. "So, your keys are really gone." He sighed, the good humor draining from his face for a second. "Yeah, car keys, apartment key, all of it. Down the drain. My phone is in my car, which is now a very expensive, very locked metal box. My roommate has a spare, but he's working a double shift until midnight. So, I was pretty much screwed." He gestured vaguely toward the window. "Until my knight in shining, a hoodie, showed up." I laughed, a nervous, breathy sound. "Hardly a knight. Just a guy with a window and a conscience." I gestured toward my sofa. "Please sit down. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? I think I have some tea." "Water would be great." "Thanks." He sat on the edge of the sofa cushion, careful not to lean back, as if he was afraid his damp clothes would ruin the fabric. It was a thoughtful, considerate gesture that I found surprisingly touching. I went to the kitchen to get him a glass of water, my mind racing. He was in my apartment. Caleb was on my sofa. When I came back, he was looking at the books on my shelf. "You're into art history?" he asked, pointing to a thick volume. Yeah, kind of. It's related to my job. I'm a graphic designer." I handed him the water, and as he took it, our fingers brushed against the cool glass. It was nothing, a fleeting millimeter of contact, but it felt like a jolt of static electricity, a tiny spark that shot right up my arm. I pulled my hand back a little too quickly. "Graphic design? That's cool," he said, seemingly oblivious to my internal short circuit. "I could never do that. I don't have the patience for all the details." "It's mostly details," I admitted. "What about you? Are you in school?" I knew he sometimes had a textbook with him, but I wanted to hear it from him. He nodded, taking a sip of water. "Yeah, I'm studying marine biology. The lifeguard gig is perfect. I get to be outside, near the water, and I get paid to study," he grinned. "Or at least that's what I tell myself. Marine biology. Of course. It was so fitting, yet so much more interesting than the generic business major I had vaguely assigned him in my head. He wasn't just the handsome lifeguard. He was Caleb, the future marine biologist who read art history books on my shelf and had a smile that could disarm a battalion. We fell into an easy conversation. He told me about his classes, about a recent trip to the coast to study tidal pools. He had a way of explaining things that was passionate and engaging, his hands moving as he described the intricate ecosystems of barnacles and sea anemones. I found myself leaning forward, completely captivated. This was a side of him I never could have seen from my window. I told him about my work, about the coffee shop logo I was wrestling with. He listened intently, asking smart questions. He wasn't just being polite. He seemed genuinely interested. For the first time in a long time, I was talking to someone who wasn't a client or a family member on the phone. We were just two people, trapped by a storm, getting to know each other. He talked about growing up in a small town, about being the youngest of three brothers. He had a self-deprecating sense of humor, making fun of his own high school awkwardness in a way that was both funny and endearing. The image of the effortlessly cool lifeguard was dissolving, replaced by someone more complex, more real, and infinitely more attractive. As he was in the middle of a story about his dog, a goofy golden retriever named Barnaby, the lights in my apartment flickered once, twice, and then died. The low hum of the refrigerator, the air conditioner, the computer, it all went silent. We were plunged into a sudden, deep darkness, the only light coming from the frequent flashes of lightning that illuminated the room in stark, momentary tableaus. "Well," Caleb said into the blackness, his voice startlingly close. "Guess that's that." My heart, which had just started to settle into a normal rhythm, kicked back into overdrive. "The power's out," I stated, the most obvious observation in human history. Stay right there. I have candles somewhere." I fumbled for my phone on the coffee table, its screen coming to life and casting a pale, ghostly light. I used its flashlight to navigate to the kitchen junk drawer, my hands shaking as I searched for candles and a lighter. The storm seemed to intensify its assault on the building, the rain hammering against the windows and the thunder rolling without pause. It felt like the world outside was trying to force us closer together. I found a few vanilla-scented candles and managed to get them lit, placing them on the coffee table. The small flames cast a warm, flickering glow across the room, creating an intimate pocket of light in the overwhelming dark. The shadows danced on the walls, making my small apartment feel like a secluded cave. When I turned back to the sofa, I saw that Caleb was shivering. His clothes were still damp, and with the air conditioning off, the residual chill was probably getting to him. "You're cold," I said. "You should change out of those wet clothes. You're going to get sick." He looked down at his soaked shirt and shorts. "I don't really have a choice, man. Everything I own is either in my locked apartment or my locked car." The offer was on my lips before I had a chance to think it through. "You can borrow some of my stuff," I said. "It might be a little big on you, but at least it's dry." My mind immediately started screaming at me. Was this weird? Was I being too forward? Caleb looked up at me, his eyes reflecting the candlelight. There was no suspicion in his gaze, only a deep, weary gratitude. "Lucas, you really don't have to do that." "I insist," I said, My voice firm despite the chaos in my chest. It's the least I can do. Come on. I led him to my bedroom, the phone flashlight cutting a nervous path in front of us. I opened my dresser and pulled out a soft, worn gray t-shirt and a pair of black sweatpants. Here, I said, handing them to him. The bathroom is just there if you want to change. He took the clothes, his fingers brushing against mine for a second longer this time. Thank you, he said, his voice low. He didn't move toward the bathroom. Instead, he just stood there in the middle of my bedroom. In the dim, flickering light from the living room, he started to pull his wet shirt over his head. My breath caught in my throat. I knew I should turn away, give him privacy, go back to the living room. But I couldn't. I was frozen, watching as he revealed a torso that was lean and strong, the product of hours spent in the sun and water. Droplets of rain still clung to his skin, glistening like tiny diamonds in the faint light. He wasn't built like a bodybuilder. He was built like a swimmer, all smooth lines and defined, functional muscle. He tossed the wet shirt onto the floor and reached for the dry one I'd given him. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, he was just standing there, bare-chested in the middle of my room, and the air grew thick with unspoken things. It was the most intensely intimate moment of my life. He pulled the gray shirt on, and it hung a little loosely on his frame, the soft cotton a stark contrast to the wet, clingy fabric he'd just removed. He shucked off his wet shorts and pulled on the sweatpants. Then he looked at me, a question in his eyes. I realized I had been staring, and I quickly looked away, my face burning. Sorry, I mumbled. It's okay, he said softly. We walked back to the living room in silence, the air between us now charged with a new and potent awareness. He sat on the sofa again, but this time he leaned back, looking more comfortable in the dry clothes. He ran a hand through his still damp hair. I sat on the other end of the couch, maintaining a respectable distance, but I could feel the warmth radiating from him across the cushions. The vanilla from the candles mixed with the clean, subtle scent of his skin, a smell of soap and rain, and something that was just uniquely him. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm rage outside. It was a comfortable silence, though. The earlier awkwardness had been replaced by this strange, fragile intimacy. The power outage and the change of clothes had stripped away the last of our pretenses. We weren't the observant graphic designer and the confident lifeguard anymore. We were just Lucas and Caleb, two people in a dark room, lit by candlelight. He shivered again, a small, involuntary tremor. I noticed it immediately. Still cold. He gave a small nod. A little. Just the damp, I guess. Acting on an impulse I didn't fully understand, I reached for the thick knit blanket I kept folded over the back of the armchair. I unfolded it and held it out. Here. He took it, but instead of just wrapping it around himself, he draped it over both of us, from his end of the sofa to mine. The blanket created a shared space, a small tint of warmth that enclosed us. Our legs were now just inches apart under the soft wool. Thanks, he murmured. He shifted slightly, turning to face me more. The candlelight carved sharp shadows on his face, highlighting his cheekbones and the curve of his mouth. His eyes, in the dimness, looked dark and deep. And then, he did something that made the entire world stop. He rested his head on my shoulder. It was a simple gesture, so light at first I almost thought I'd imagined it. But then he settled, a soft sigh escaping his lips, his hair tickling my neck. My whole body went rigid. Every nerve ending was on fire. I could feel the steady, slow rhythm of his breathing. I could smell the faint scent of my own laundry detergent on the shirt he was wearing. He didn't say anything. He just rested there. It wasn't a romantic move, not explicitly. It could have been just a gesture of exhaustion, of someone letting their guard down after a stressful ordeal. But it felt like more. It felt like trust. In the flickering candlelight, with the storm roaring outside as our soundtrack, he had closed the distance between us in the most profound way possible. I sat there, hardly daring to breathe, my arm pressed against his head on my shoulder, and I felt a sense of rightness, of terrifying, hopeful rightness that I had never felt before. He must have drifted off for a few minutes. His breathing deepened, and the weight of his head on my shoulder grew heavier, more settled. I didn't move a muscle. I just sat there, memorizing the feeling, the impossible reality of it. This man, who had been a distant figure in my daily landscape, was now asleep on my shoulder, wearing my clothes, in my candlelit living room. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest, a frantic drum against the slow, steady rhythm of the rain. Just as I was starting to let myself believe this moment could last forever, the lights flickered back on with a sudden, jarring hum. The refrigerator whirred to life. The digital clock on the oven blinked 12 o'clock, and the room was flooded with the harsh, unforgiving glare of the overhead light. The intimate, magical bubble we had been in was instantly shattered. Caleb stirred, lifting his head from my shoulder with a start. He blinked against the sudden brightness, looking disoriented. Whoa, power's back. He looked at me, then at the space between us on the couch, as if suddenly realizing how close we'd been. A light blush crept up his neck. Sorry, I think I kind of passed out on you. It's okay, I said, my voice sounding strained to my own ears. I felt exposed, as if the bright light had laid all my secret hopes bare. I quickly pulled the blanket off of us and started folding it with meticulous, unnecessary precision. The easy intimacy of the darkness was gone, replaced by a thick, humming awkwardness. We were hyper-aware of each other again, but in a new way. The line had been crossed. He had rested his head on my shoulder. That was a fact now, an event that we both knew had happened, and we had no idea what to do with it. Just then, a buzzing sound came from the pile of his wet clothes on my bedroom floor. His phone. He'd left it in his shorts pocket. He went to retrieve it, and I heard him answer it, his voice low. Hey, yeah, I'm okay. It's a long story. He came back into the living room a minute later, phone in hand. That was my roommate, Mark. He's home. He's going to come grab me. The news landed in my stomach like a stone. It was over. The storm was over, the power was back, and he was leaving. Oh, good, I said, trying to sound genuinely pleased for him. That's great. He nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. Yeah. I should probably give you your clothes back. The practicalities of the situation felt absurd. 10 minutes ago, he was asleep on me. Now we were negotiating a clothing handoff. Don't worry about it, I said quickly. Just keep them. You can bring them back whenever. Or not. It's fine. I didn't want to watch him change again. I didn't think my heart could take it. He stood awkwardly in the middle of my living room for a few moments. Well, thank you. Seriously, Lucas. For everything. The towels, the water, the clothes, for not leaving me to drown out there. Anytime, I said, the word feeling both true and completely inadequate. The buzzer for my apartment rang, a harsh sound that made us both jump. That's probably him, Caleb said. He started for the door, then paused, turning back to me. For a second, I thought he was going to say something else, something important. The air crackled with the possibility of it. But he just gave me a small, tight smile. I'll see you around. Yeah, see you. I echoed to his back as he walked out the door. I listened to his footsteps descend the stairs, the sound of the main door opening and closing, and then silence. He was gone. The apartment felt vast and empty. The only evidence he had ever been there was a damp patch on the sofa, a used water glass on the coffee table, and the lingering scent of vanilla and rain. The next day was torture. I sat at my desk, staring at the coffee shop logo, but all I could see was the flickering candlelight on Caleb's face. I replayed every second of the night before. His laugh, the way his fingers brushed mine, the weight of his head on my shoulder. It was this last part that I obsessed over, turning it over and over in my mind like a smooth, mysterious stone. What did it mean? Was it just a simple, human need for comfort in a stressful situation? A sign of exhaustion? Or was it possible, just possible, that it meant more? That it was a flicker of the same connection I was feeling, a connection so powerful it scared me? Hope is a dangerous thing. It felt like a fragile seedling pushing its way through concrete, and I was terrified that the slightest touch would crush it. I looked out the window. It was a bright, sunny day, the world washed clean by the storm. And there he was. Caleb was back in his chair, sunglasses on, book in his lap, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The distance between my window and his chair felt 1,000 times larger, and yet 1,000 times smaller than it had before. He looked up, almost as if he could feel me watching him. Our eyes met across the lawn. My breath hitched. Before, I would have ducked away. But this time, I held his gaze. He lifted a hand in a small, hesitant wave. I slowly raised my own and waved back. It was a tiny interaction, but it felt monumental. It was an acknowledgement. Last night happened. We both remember. but the acknowledgement only brought more questions. The rest of the day, a new, excruciating tension settled between us. Every time I glanced out the window, I felt like I was walking on a tightrope. When I had to leave my apartment to check the mail, my stomach twisted into knots. I saw him talking to some kids by the side of the pool, and the easy, casual way he laughed with them sent a pang of jealousy and confusion through me. Was that who he was? And was last night just an anomaly? I spent the next 48 hours in a state of suspended animation, analyzing every frame of our time together. The way he'd called me a knight in a shining hoodie, the genuine interest in his eyes when I talked about my work. The way he had stood in my bedroom, not moving to the bathroom for privacy. Had I imagined a certain look in his eye then? Was I projecting my own desperate wanting onto a series of meaningless events? The fear of rejection was a cold, heavy presence. I had been safe in my fortress of observation, but now I had let someone in, and the walls were starting to feel like a prison. The quiet loneliness that had once been a comfortable companion now felt sharp and painful. I had tasted connection, and the thought of returning to my old routine, of him just being the lifeguard in the window again, was unbearable. He still had my clothes. It was a loose thread, a flimsy excuse for a future interaction, and I clung to it. On Thursday evening, I was making myself a sad dinner of pasta with butter when I heard a soft knock on my door. My heart leaped into my throat. It couldn't be. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the door, my socked feet silent on the floor, and looked through the peephole. It was him. It was Caleb. He was standing there in the hallway, not in his red lifeguard shorts, but in jeans and a plain black t-shirt. He was holding a neatly folded gray t-shirt and a pair of black sweatpants. My clothes. He looked nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Hey, he said, his voice a little strained. He held out the clothes. I washed these. Thanks again for letting me borrow them. You didn't have to do that, I said, taking the clothes from him. Our fingers didn't touch this time. The fabric was still warm from the dryer. Thanks. An awkward silence stretched between us. He was here, at my door, but the easy conversation we'd shared during the storm was gone, replaced by this stilted formality. This was it, I thought. He's returning the clothes, closing the loop. We'll go back to being strangers who wave from a distance. The thought was so crushing I almost couldn't breathe. Well, I started, preparing to say goodbye, preparing to let him go. Can I come in for a second? He cut in, the words rushing out as if he'd been holding them back. I was so surprised I could only nod. I stepped back and he walked inside, stopping in the middle of the living room, in almost the exact same spot he'd stood 2 nights ago. He didn't sit down. He just stood there, rubbing the back of his neck, an anxious energy coming off him in waves. Look, Lucas, he began, finally meeting my eyes. His gaze was intense, vulnerable. I have to be honest about something. The other night, I wasn't entirely truthful with you. My mind raced. What did he mean? Had he lied about something? Okay, I said slowly, bracing myself. He took a breath. When my keys fell down the drain, and my phone was locked in my car. Well, that part was true. But my roommate, Mark? He wasn't working a double. I could have called him from your apartment as soon as I got inside. Your landline was working, or I could have asked to use your phone. But I didn't. I just stared at him, my brain struggling to process his words. Why? I finally managed to ask. Because I didn't want to leave, he said, his voice quiet but clear. I saw my chance and I took it. It was stupid, I know, but I've been seeing you for months. My stomach did a flip. I'd see you up here, in your window, when I was at the pool. Sometimes you'd be working, all focused, and sometimes you'd just be looking out. And I wanted to meet you. So badly. But I had no idea how. I kept trying to think of an excuse to talk to you. But everything felt so lame. He gave a short, self-deprecating laugh. And then the storm happened, and I dropped my keys, and you came out there. It felt like the universe was just handing me an opportunity. So I lied. I stayed. I'm sorry if that was weird or creepy. Weird? Creepy? It was the most wonderful thing I had ever heard. All the anxiety, all the overthinking, all the fear of the last 2 days just evaporated, replaced by a dazzling, blinding hope. He had wanted to meet me. He had noticed me, too. And, he continued, taking a hesitant step closer to me. When the power went out, and I put my head on your shoulder, that wasn't just because I was tired, Lucas. I mean, I was tired, it was more than that. I felt really comfortable with you. Safe. And I haven't felt that way with anyone in a really long time. My own confession tumbled out, clumsy and breathless. I've been watching you all summer. I thought you were. I don't know. I never thought you'd even notice me. A slow smile spread across his face, a real one this time, full of relief and warmth. How could I not notice you? He said softly. He was standing so close now I could see the tiny flecks of green in his brown eyes. You have no idea how many times I almost just came up here and knocked on your door. You should have, I whispered. Yeah, he breathed. I should have. And then he closed the small space that was left between us. He gently cupped my jaw with his hand, his thumb stroking my cheek. He was looking at me as if he was asking a question, giving me a chance to back away. I didn't. I leaned into his touch, and he kissed me. It wasn't like in the movies. There was no sudden music, no dramatic crescendo. It was quiet and tentative at first, then deep and sure. It was a kiss that tasted of relief and unspoken longing, a conversation we'd been waiting months to have. It was confident and mutual, a perfect confirmation of everything that had just been said. When we finally broke apart, we rested our foreheads together, both of us breathing a little heavily. So, he murmured, his lips still just inches from mine. Just to be clear, you're not mad that I basically invited myself to hide from a storm in your apartment under false pretenses? I laughed, a real, happy laugh that felt like it came from the deepest part of my soul. No, Caleb, I'm not mad. The weeks that followed felt like waking up from a long dream. We fell into a rhythm that was new and exciting, but also felt incredibly natural. Our first official date was a walk along the river, where he told me the scientific names of all the different water birds. I cooked him dinner in my apartment, and we didn't need a power outage to sit close together on the sofa. He met my world of pixels and precision with a refreshing curiosity, and I was introduced to his world of tides and trails. He showed me that being observant didn't have to mean being on the outside. He was patient and kind, and he had a way of looking at me that made me feel like I was the most interesting person in the world. The fortress I had built around myself didn't crumble, it just dissolved, its walls turning into open doors. We learned the small, important things about each other. He hated olives. I couldn't sleep without the fan on. He had a terrible singing voice, but would sing along to the radio in the car anyway, completely unself-conscious. I learned that his outward confidence was a shield for a deep-seated desire to make everyone around him happy. He learned that my quietness wasn't aloofness, but a way of processing the world before I spoke. Now it's autumn. The air is crisp, and the leaves on the trees outside my window are turning brilliant shades of red and gold. The community pool has been closed for a month. The bright blue water is covered by a drab gray tarp, the white lifeguard chair is empty, and the iron gate is locked for the season. The view from my window is different now. It's quieter. Caleb is here, sitting on my sofa, reading one of his textbooks. He's wearing my gray t-shirt and a pair of old sweatpants, his unofficial uniform for when he's at my place. Every so often, he'll read a particularly interesting fact aloud, and I'll pause my work to listen, smiling. My apartment, once a sanctuary of solitude, is now a shared space, filled with his warmth and easy laughter. It feels more like home than it ever did before. Sometimes I look out the window at that empty pool and I think about the summer. I think about the man I watched from a distance, this beautiful, unattainable idea. And then I look over at the real man on my sofa, the one who knows how I take my coffee and who leaves his socks on my floor, and a wave of gratitude so profound washes over me, it almost takes my breath away. It's funny, isn't it? You can spend so much time watching life from a safe distance, convinced you know how the story goes. You build walls to protect yourself from the possibility of getting hurt, but those same walls end up keeping out the possibility of being truly happy. It took a summer thunderstorm to wash all of that away for me, to short-circuit my routine and force me into the world. It showed me that sometimes, the one thing you've been secretly wishing for has been wishing for you right back, just waiting for the rain to stop so you can finally see each other clearly.